the budget and the vote, and possibly not going to vote tonight on waiving the superintendent certification. Those two things to me are connected. The first budgeting guiding principle that was shared last time was keep cuts away from the classroom. A fourth of teachers in HISD are uncertified, yet Principal of the Year winners are let go, certified beloved educators are fired. That is a cut to the classroom. And then soon, someday, you might waive the certification at the top. Would you go to a doctor who isn't board certified, who just hung around hospitals? Then why should Houston accept a superintendent without credentials to lead a school district? Principle 2, prioritize resources toward district goals. Board Goal 4 targets growth for special education students. Instead, the U.S. Department of Education has opened a civil rights investigation into this district for separating thousands of students with disabilities from their neighborhood schools. Key Action 5 says, improve special education service delivery. Removing children from their neighborhood schools, their teachers, their classmates, that's not improvement, that's disruption. And the budget costs of that disruption, legal fees, transportation, due process hearings, are not in this budget. That bill is coming. Principle 3, long-term financial sustainability. $4.5 million for 9 AI schools is a budget already losing already losing $50 million from enrollment decline. Miles loves AI. He uses it for curriculum, for data, for pretty slideshows. But AI is not a teacher. A computer cannot see a child's frustration and say, breathe, or I believe in you. Only a human can do that. The rest of the developed world is reducing screen time in schools. Miles is doing just the opposite. This is not long-term sustainability. This is an ego trip with a budget line. Board goal measures reading math graduation rates. No social emotional learning, no joy, no whole child. He promised NES schools would bring dinner and after school programs. He underdelivered there. He will underdeliver in future 2 schools too. A child who is struggling, isolated, staring at a screen, that child is not ready for the future. That child needs human connection. A man who doesn't value credentials, doesn't value community, and doesn't value compliance has no business running the largest school district in Texas. When this takeover ends, you will be handing the elected board and this community a disaster to clean up. It's not too late though. You still have time to do right. Remove Mike Miles, find a superintendent with the qualifications, integrity, and courage to work with Houston, not above it. We need to start building trust and accountability back into this administration. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, Trustee Gomez.
Thank you. I've been surprised to receive pushback whenever I push for more community engagement from the district and the Board of Managers. And I'd love to be proven wrong, but it seems to me that the perspective of the district has been, well, Placido, what more would you like us to do? We have press releases, we do interviews on HIC now and release them. Placido, when you say the community, it sounds like you just mean people who come and protest, and some people just don't want to understand. And I remember, it reminds me when I was a first-year teacher, and I was correctly warned against having the mindset of, it's my job to teach it, not my job for the students to learn it. We'd immediately recognize that as bad teaching and treat it as such, and yet that's how I feel that we are being treated as the community. It seems like the perspective is, from the district, is it's my job to say it, not the community's job to understand it. If somebody were to come to this podium right now and say something like, well, those kids in those neighborhoods, they're just unteachable, they don't want to learn, we'd easily recognize that as unacceptable and unbecoming of somebody who wants to be in front of our kids. So we cannot do the same thing to our community. As a public official, I also get heat from the public sometimes when I take stances that are unpopular, but I still believe in. And when I'm at my best, I try to handle that with grace. If somebody openly disrespects me, I try to think, well, maybe they're having a bad day and misdirecting at me. If somebody misrepresents my point of view, I think, well, maybe I didn't communicate it well enough. You know, if somebody attacks me by saying, you know, the only reason why, Placido, you've gotten to where you are is because you're handsome and charming, that hurts, but I have to understand that that might be the case. There might be some truth to every criticism that people have. So I invite you to take the same perspective. I've done the best I can to go back to places where I feel like people have been a little bit hostile to me. And it's unpleasant, but it's the job of public officials. And on the other side of it, There's a lot more respect, there's a lot more honesty, possibility for open conversation that we should be having between the district and the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee McDonough, welcome.
Good evening. Michael McDonough, elected HISD trustee for District 6, representing Sharpstown and Westside communities. You know the phenomenon where a friend buys a certain car and then you start seeing that car everywhere? Or you talk about hiking and then all of a sudden you start seeing hiking ads all over your phone. That's called confirmation bias. And it's the tendency to look for evidence that supports what we already believe instead of objectively evaluating all the information available. And we all are vulnerable to it at all times. But it's that idea of searching to fully understand that's so critical. Now, last Thursday, we heard emotional testimony from families impacted by the proposed changes to special education programming. We also heard the pedagogical rationale for a plan that, by the district's own numbers, will impact more than 5,000 students and families, 5,000 kids involuntarily sent to another school. Now, if the administration or board wants reassurance about this plan, they may point to the district's report that more than 1,500 phone calls were answered and that 90% of those calls were positive. But I would hope there is further inquiry into what those numbers actually mean. How many of those calls came from families whose students are being reassigned to a different campus? After all, approximately 16,000 students are not experiencing any change and will remain at their current schools. It is not surprising that many of those families would respond positively because nothing is changing for them. That distinction matters. The administration has also stated that any displaced student who currently receives transportation through their IEP will continue receiving transportation to their new campus. Now that sounds reassuring on the face, but I hope the board also asks what percentage of those 5,000 students currently have transportation written into their IEPs, because many of those do not, and those families will now bear the burden of getting their children to a new campus. We also hear that capping campus budget increases at 4% compared to last year is reasonable, but a closer examination shows that millions of dollars, are still being removed from schools, even though many of the students generating those dollars remain on those campuses. In effect, the district is leaving the students while taking the money. I'm not sure that aligns with this board's goal of student outcomes. Finally, the administration proposes asking $500 more per student for academic need at every Spotlight campus. I understand the desire to support schools facing significant academic challenges, but an objective review may reveal an inequity created by this approach. Two students with identical academic needs, as measured by the state, may now receive different levels of support simply because one attends a Spotlight school while another attends their neighborhood earned autonomy school. In practice, a student's zip code could determine the level of educational support they receive, and I thought this administration was committed to moving away from that model. Elected trustees and appointed board of managers all took the same oath. We share a responsibility to ensure students grow stronger and smarter every day, and that our public schools remain a compelling and trusted option for families. This is difficult and complicated work. It requires curiosity, rigor, and a willingness to challenge assumptions. While confirmation bias can be challenging for all of us under the best of circumstances, I hope you will continue to seek the fullest possible picture before making decisions that will affect thousands of students and families. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from the reigning speakers, beginning with HISD students and parents. Speakers, please state your name and topic when you step up to the mic. Ms. Smith, you may call our speakers.
Yes. Kai Henson, followed by Victoria Ordonez and Marie Rodriguez. Is Kai here? Okay. Victoria?
Hello, my name is Victoria, and I'm going to be discussing the budget. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit first, though. As someone with a sister with Down syndrome and a previous SPED student, I find these new policies to be restrictive. You are segregating students with special needs and treating them as if they do not deserve a proper education along Gen Ed students. Although you think what you're doing is beneficial, it's the opposite. You're restricting special needs students from being social with others, which is not what they need. They don't need to just socialize with fellow classmates with special needs. They need to communicate with people outside of those that they are accustomed to. And to discuss the budget, the Texas Education Agency has already paid dearly for failing students with disabilities. The U.S. Department of Education fined TEA $33.3 million for the IDEA noncompliance after years of violating the rights of special education students. That process lasted over 4 years and drained the educational resources that should have gone directly to children. Now, HISD is working into that same trap while cutting millions from its budget. The Office for Civil Rights is already investigating this district, and if systemic violations are found, HISD could face legal costs, corrective action expenses, transportation obligations, and even the loss of federal special education funding. So I ask, is this district truly prepared to absorb those costs? That is all. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will be discussing the budget in relation to special education. As a sister of a special education student, it is heartbreaking to see HISD move towards separating students with disabilities into hub schools away from their peers and communities. Students with disabilities deserve the same opportunities, education, and social experiences as other students. And moving them because of their disabilities feels unfair and harmful. Many students will struggle being forced into completely new environments after becoming comfortable in their schools. At the same time, HISD is creating serious financial and legal risks by doing this. The Office for Civil Rights is already investigating the district for possible violations involving students with disabilities, and IDEA noncompliance could lead to major legal fees, transportation costs, federal penalties, and even the loss of federal special education funding. Nothing in this budget indicates that there are funds allocated to handle this federal investigation, so where is this money supposed to come from? HISD is facing a budget shortfall, yes, yet the decision could cost the district even more while hurting the students who need support the most. Shame on y'all for allowing the education system to move towards separation instead of inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deanna Condita, followed by Jackie Anderson.
Good evening. I'm Diana Candida, parent of a third grader. Tonight, I want to speak about the damage being done to HISD under the leadership of Mike Miles and why his lack of superintendent certification matters. Superintendent certification programs exist to prepare leaders for the enormous responsibility of managing public school systems. They train leaders in ethics, financial accountability, communication, educational law, strategic planning, and community engagement. These are essential qualifications for anyone trusted with the future of over 170,000 children. Yet Houston ISD is being led by someone who never
to get together and get this guy out of jail.
And the consequences are visible across this district every day. Teachers are leaving in large numbers. Enrollment continues to decline. Morale has collapsed. Parents are ignored, and students are being treated like data and widgets instead of human beings. Major decisions are being forced onto schools without transparency or collaboration, and inequity across the district is growing. HISD is facing financial problems while valuable public properties are being sold off. These buildings belong to the people of Houston and were meant to serve future generations of students, not cover the costs of poor leadership and reckless priorities. What makes this even more troubling is that while schools struggle, Mike Miles continues to benefit through his salary, contracts, and growing influence. Public education should never become a system where leadership profits while children suffer. You bear a responsibility, Board of Managers. If you remain silent while schools decline and communities are ignored, you become complicit in this failure. Houston deserves qualified, ethical leadership focused on students, not power or self-interest. I implore you to look honestly and objectively at what is happening in HISD. Do your job of properly overseeing budgets and policies, asking questions, and ideally fire Mike Miles. But if you don't want to do that, I ask that at a very minimum, you require Mike Miles.
Thank you.
Board of Managers, I urge you not to waive the Miles certificate requirement tonight or any other night. Standards matter, especially when you are talking about leadership, instruction, and the future of students. If this certification was created to ensure individuals are properly trained and prepared, then waiving it sends the message that requirements only apply when convenient. Board of Managers, you are making history. You are making history for setting the bar low and dumbing down education. Our educators, paraprofessionals, and staff are expected to meet every certification deadline and compliance standard placed before them. They spend their own time and money earning credentials because the district says those qualifications are important. When they don't, they are let go or non-renewed. It is unfair and damaging to morale to decide those standards can only be bypassed by select individuals. 3 years, no certification, and no attempt to obtain one. The public deserves confidence that every person placed in a critical role has completed the training deemed necessary for success. Since testing is so important, why don't you require Mr. Miles to take the superintendent's certification exam? Lowering expectations does not strengthen our school. It weakens trust, and trust, does that sound familiar? Our students deserve qualified leadership, not waived standards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jesse Heiner, followed by Dr. Ruth Hoffman-Lack.
Good evening, Jesse Heiner. I'm here reading a statement on behalf of an HFT member who is an aspiring teacher in HISD. She's uncomfortable being here for fear of retaliation for her statement. English, and this is what she says, English is not my first language, so before entering an ACP program, I had to pass an English proficiency exam. That process alone required a lot of time, preparation, and effort, but I kept pushing forward because becoming a teacher truly mattered to me. I came to HISD believing I would have the opportunity to grow as an educator while completing my certification through an ACP program. I genuinely care about students and wanted to build a long-term career in education. I was told there would be support, mentorship, and realistic pathway to certification while working full-time in the classroom. The reality I experienced in HISD was very different. My first assignment was at a PUA school where after the principal was removed, the new administration created a culture of fear, unrealistic expectations, and constant pressure. Staff were made to feel that if they questioned anything, they could lose their jobs. Nearly 90% of the staff eventually left that campus. I later transferred to another PUA campus following the NES curriculum, but the challenges continued. My contract hours are from 7:15 a.m. to 3:15 p.m., but I'm required to stay late almost every day for demo days or after-school tutoring. Many aspiring teachers were left exhausted, overwhelmed, and unsupported while still being expected to perform at extremely high levels every single day. It is deeply unfair that Mike Morath and the state-appointed Board of Managers continue to grant waivers to Mike Miles while teachers fighting to become certified are denied that same flexibility and support. Many of us entered this profession with the passion and good intentions, only to leave feeling burned out and unsupported. Those in power should remember that no position lasts forever.
Thank you.
Good evening. Dr. Ruth Hoffman-Lack. As Placido mentioned, a lot of the unpleasantness that you have to go through sitting up there could be avoided if you actually engage with the community. And I understand that in many of your professions, that's not something that happens. But you got a lot of really bright and creative people who actually do care about this district. I mean, I have a grandchild who's 3 right now, but I don't have kids in the district. I am so passionate about public education that I come up here and bug you all the time. And there's a lot more of me out there. We have great ideas. So if, for example, you had come to the public with the problem of, we've got these schools we might need to close, we have these buildings, you know what? What if we did partnerships with other businesses, community organizations that provide services that benefit the community, and they could pay rent to use part or all of those buildings? That would offset the cost of the building maintenance. It would be a win-win for everybody. If you look at the Sunrise Centers, right now we pay rent for those buildings for, I think, all but one of them. The district pays rent to have Sunrise. Well, heck, why didn't we put them in some of the buildings? And then we wouldn't have had to close the schools. And then you wouldn't have had all these people that were upset. I mean, there's so many people that are smart and actually know about public education, which none of you do. It's not your fault, but you just don't. And we would love to work with you to come up with things that work. The situation with moving kids around for special education, if you had talked to families and parents and people, we could have come up with all kinds of creative ways to work on that. But instead, you blindside people and you do real harm. And then you lose all of the faith that the community has or the trust that the community has, and you are never going to get anywhere.
Thank you.
Our last speaker is on Zoom. I'll wait till they're displayed. Great. Melissa Yarborough, please go ahead.
Thank you. Whenever it comes up on the agenda, I urge you to vote no on the waiver for Mike Miles' certification. Please put our students' education above political agendas. We have a big problem with certification in HISD. As soon as the uncertified superintendent was hired, our percentage of uncertified teachers skyrocketed. My children have had several uncertified teachers over the last 3 school years. The data shows that this is true for many other children in HISD. Teachers in alternative certification programs have 2 years to get a valid certification or else they're fired. What do you think the logic behind that rule is? Do you think that the original intent was to encourage certification so that students would be more likely to learn from qualified teachers? That's what I think. But the way that the uncertified superintendent has been running off our certified teachers, the placements are running very low. So after 2 years, a child's uncertified teacher is removed only to be replaced by a different uncertified teacher who is later removed and replaced by yet another uncertified teacher, and so on. Is this an oopsie or was this intentional? Is the goal to keep teachers out of strong contracts so that you can treat your employees worse? How does this help the students? I'll tell you what it looks like from my kids' perspective, a revolving door of unqualified teachers who never stay long enough to establish a relationship with the school or build a solid program. Why are you so hard on the teachers yet so lenient with the superintendent? You all have the chance to be heroes and vote no on his waiver. Do not request a waiver for the uncertified superintendent. Instead, please get us a qualified one who will fill our schools with certified teachers and who will stick around. Houston will thank you. And also, by the way, why is there no sign language interpreter tonight? You can say that you care about students with disabilities, but your actions speak louder than words.
Thank you. This concludes our public comment. We'll now have a presentation on our workshop topic, the 26-27 district budget. Superintendent Miles, you have the floor.
Board President Campo, members of the board. We're here to talk about the budget. This is our second workshop, and then we have a budget presentation again in June 11th for the third session on the budget. After which I'm hoping the board will pass the budget. The main exercise, though, and looking at it writ large, is to ensure that we have as close to the balanced budget as possible. That's number one, but that's not even the most important. The most important is when you have scarce resources to prioritize those resources in a way where you can still meet the achievement goals. We've been doing, our students and teachers have been doing phenomenal with regard to achievement goals. The fastest growing achievement the state has ever seen in 2 years. And the budget has to contribute to that. And we have raised teacher salaries, for example, $15,000 in 3 years. That's taking care of teachers, but it's also taking care of the instruction in the classroom. Without effective teachers, we would not have good instruction and we would not raise achievement scores. So the bigger point here is you're going to see also, like you did last workshop, how we prioritize resources, because in scarce resource times, and it is tight, especially with declining enrollment, with all the ESSER monies that we had to get rid of out of the recurrent expenses and so forth, all of those things, budgets are tight. And they are in most places, not just in HISD. And that means you have to prioritize resources and not try to have all the things that we would like to have. We need the things that will get us the results for kids. So with that preamble, let me jump right into the workshop. We're going to look at the preliminary proposed budgets, so the draft budget that we hope you will approve in June. We'll talk a little bit about the school budgets, the central office budgets, and then just a beat on health insurance. We are on this timeline, so we're at the May 20th board budget workshop, and then the June board vote on the budget. And just a reminder, this is a process. It's an iterative process. It has to be tied closely to action planning and metrics. And therefore, it is a work in progress. And so any of the numbers you see are tentative until we actually get to the budget. And even then, after we pass the budget, there's almost always a budget amendment that happens in every district. Our budget process starts with an action plan, which starts with the board goals. So we ensure that we are able to meet the board goals with both our action plan and our budget, and these are the board goals. And we will continue to do this, keep cuts as far away from the classroom as possible, prioritize resources, I just emphasized that, long-term financial stability, and then prepare kids for year 2035 world and workplace. And that means we have to put money behind that key action. Just to review quickly, the budget components we talked about last time. How we get our budget generally is enrollment on the revenue side. Enrollment times ADA times weighted ADA, and then weighted means that there are special categories of students where you get additional money. Taxable property values, and then the state basic allotment. So our enrollment projection, we said last time, we're projecting a 4,000 student loss. Hopefully it won't be that many, but it was a little larger this year, mostly, we believe, because of immigration policies and some other factors. Average daily attendance is a little bit higher. That's a good thing. But because we have fewer kids, we have a weighted ADA that's lower than last year. Taxable property values is going to be about flat, so that won't impact our revenue side this year that much. And then you see the state basic allotment set by the legislature. So on the revenue side, big picture, local revenue is from our property taxes, 1.6 billion, state revenue, 364 million, and then the federal revenue, you'll see on the next page, the grants, That indirect cost is actually administrative costs, so we get 20 million from the federal government for that. And then other sources we'll show you on another sheet. But that's other sources, like if there's any property that's sold, that would be under other sources. So total estimated revenue is $2,036 million. And then on top of that, we have the federal grants. These are the title monies, and it's about 177. It's important to point out to the board, last year, we had about $18 million more in that figure, 18 to 19 million more. That's the amount of money we didn't receive this year that we should have received from the federal government. But we did not get all the monies coming to us from the Department of Education. There was a lot of back and forth, as you remember, on Department of Education. And we're not the only ones. The entire nation was cut in many ways. But for us, it meant somewhere around 18 or 19 million dollars. And so this number, you'll see, is lower than last year's number because we're anticipating less money. So that's the revenue side. 177 million on top of 2,036. And then this is the expenditure side. So these are the function codes on your left-hand side there. You can see. You have a lot more detail, obviously, in your documents in your hand. This is just for slideshow. But all total, the expenditures is about $2,015 million. Now, if you count the transfers out, which is the interest on our bonds and the maintenance tax note, that's also another.
Okay, so for those that are not understanding, this screen right here is the general fund expenditures, the summary. Long story short, this is telling you where everything is being spent or how they're dispersing the funds. So there's expenditure versus expense. The expenditures, they're recorded as soon as the purchase is made or the payment occurs, but the expenses, they're day-to-day operational costs. So this right here, this is how much is spent at the exact moment. So once they receive those grants, this is how it's split up. All right, I'm gonna keep going.
Transfer out, so it's like an expenditure. It would be $2,037 million. You see that footnote down there. So back to the budget and assumptions page that we went over last time, updated a little bit, and you have it in front of you. I know that the numbers are small to see on the screen, but you have this document in your folder. The bottom line is you can see that our estimated expenditures for 26-27 school year, on the right-hand side there is $2,037 million, and the estimated revenue is $2,036 million. So we believe we're very close to a balanced budget. Again, these have changed a little bit, but our starting off point looks pretty good for a balanced budget, and that's one of the main things we need to do when we budget. But the other is to make sure that what you see in there and what you see in the function codes is budgets that tied to our key priorities, which is illustrated in our action plan. So as you can see on the right-hand side, especially at the top there, that we're raising money in the EAS schools. We're still using PUA and finance, but we'll get that right. EAS schools, and then salary increases for central office. I know it's tough. We have a tight budget, but we wanted to prioritize raising salaries, not just for teachers, but also central office, We also raised the minimum wage for our hourly employees from 15 to 17. So that's, you see that reflected here. So those are our priorities up there. You see electricity and water is not a priority, but it's just something that is going to go up, and some other things that are not priorities, but that are just expenditures that we have to pay for. And then you can.
Okay, so let me break this down because it looks like a lot. All right, the left side, which is over here, that's the money coming in. That's the revenue. So right now, HISD is facing a massive drop in the money that they usually get. The big losses include a massive $50 million. You can see it right here because student enrollment is dropping. They're losing 4,000. They're projecting to lose 4,000 students, meaning that students will be transferring out the district or will be homeschooled. So they're also losing another 50 million from a disaster relief tax ending, and then 24 million from the 1882 partnership schools. So also they are making money from selling property. That's about 35 million. Let me see the property sales, such as old schools or old buildings. And there's also a teacher incentive fund. That's about 27.5 million. So when you add up all the new money and subtract all the lost money, the district is down $38.4 million compared to what they used to have. Okay. Now on the right side, that's the money that's going out. That's the spending. Okay. So what we need to mainly worry about is they're spending about 61.5. Okay, 62.5 million dollars. That's the new expenses. That includes utility bills. You know, the electricity and the water is going up. That's costing about 13.5 million. And they're also giving raises to central office employees, and they're also increasing health insurance. Now the cuts as to how they're saving money, they're still slashing the budget by $124 million. And the cuts are going in the central office budgets. That's about $35 million. They're also going to decrease funding on the new education system schools, aka NES schools, what they already brought in. That's $29 million. They're also going to consolidate and or close schools. They are closing some schools, so that's about $15 million there. They're also going to cut back on overtime pay, and that's about $3 million. So overall, money going in is about $2 million. I'm sorry, $2 billion, and money going out about $2 billion. So it's about the same. Hope that helps. Let me keep going.
You can see where we're decreasing expenditures. So that's why it's a negative, that decreased expenditures. All total, though, you can see it's $2.37 billion, and our priorities will allow us to still maintain student academic achievement and prepare for year 2035 world and workplace. And so this is the budget. This is the draft of the budget that we hope the board will pass. This is the format that budgets get passed in, and this is now the third time, so I'm familiar to the board members who've been here. But for this page right here, I would like Dan to come up and speak to it from the finance office.
Thank you, Superintendent Miles. Good evening, board members. Daniel Flores, Senior Executive Director of Budgeting. I don't want to downplay this one page, although this is what you are legally required to approve on June 11th. 3 different funds, but we spend obviously months putting all the details together. And after the budget's approved, we spend a few more months putting all the details together in a 200-page budget book that gets published. So with all that being said, we have the general fund, the debt service fund, and then nutrition services. We obviously talk most about the general fund. We provided some summary information This has a little bit more detail. $1.99 billion in revenue, the majority of that coming from local sources, taxes, interest, earnings. We have the appropriations split up by more detailed function. I think there was a roll-up in the slide that you previously saw. All the ones were grouped together, twos together, threes together. Our three most are expensive functions, obviously instruction, function 11, school leadership, facilities, maintenance, and operations, for a total of $2.015 billion, as the superintendent said earlier. Then we have a third section, which is below the line, the other financing sources and uses, and we talked about the $46 million in other sources, and then the $22 million in other uses, which brings us nearly to a balanced budget. It is a deficit of $790,000, which shows that we would decrease the fund balance by that amount, $790,000. Moving on to the debt service. The majority of this is also tax collections at a smaller tax rate. It's about 16.6 cents. So that's the local sources in that revenue, for a tune of $385 million in total revenue for debt service. Now this pays the principal and the interest on our bonds. Total expenditures, $444 million. We do have some other sources in this fund as well. We will be drawing down fund balance by about $27 million in this fund. And then the last column is nutrition services. So this is breakfast and lunch program. Most of this is federal sources, right? We get reimbursed from the state. $131 million in total revenue. On the expenditure side, you'll see there's less functions in the detail. Of course, the majority of it is in function 35, which is food services. Total expenditures, $130 million, and almost nearly a balanced budget as well. We look to add maybe about $500,000 to the bottom line on this fund.
Thank you. And again, just want to remind you, this is a draft. We're at the end of the school year, but we still have a couple months. We have the rest of this month, we have June and July. So these numbers will change a little bit, but this is our best estimate at this point in time at how the budget will look for next year. And you can see we're trying to maintain fiscal responsibility by bringing close to a balanced budget to this board.
Long story short, more people getting laid off, and if they save money by closing the school,
And sir, we can stop for questions, or I can go on.
Like I told y'all years ago.
What's
Go
your
ahead, rock on.
pleasure?
Anybody have questions at this point? Go ahead, Marty.
I think I have a silly question. $68,900 in food services that we pay directly, and the $125 million that the federal government pays. Does that mean we don't cover any of the costs of food services?
On the local sources, this is the $6 million.
I'm just looking at the food services number there, $68,000. What
So
is it?
there is some a la carte sales and things that bring in local revenue
Okay.
on the nutrition service side. But the majority of it is vastly from the federal government reimbursement.
And that number is, so the federal government's $125 million is derived, is an invoice we give them and they pay us back, or do they somehow allocate that based on students or whatever?
Per
else?
meal.
Per
Per
meal.
meal allocation for breakfast and for lunch.
Okay, fine.
And for snacks. I mean, there's a couple different criteria that we submit back.
So that does fluctuate according to enrollment, but it is
Correct.
it's a direct cost to the government. If we feed a kid, they pay us for it.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Go ahead.
Can you give me a sense, Superintendent Miles or Mr. Flores, whoever makes more sense, what kind of fund balances do we try to maintain? And I'm interested really in both the general fund and the debt service fund.
Yeah, I can speak to the general, I can speak to both, but, and then add, please, if you want. In the general fund, the guidance from the state is 3 months of operating revenue. And so for us, a district the size of $2 billion, we try to do more than 3 months. And so 550 million is a good number. We should be above 550. And so we're well above that, but you know, it's good to be prudent because there may be a rainy day, and it doesn't happen every year, but every once in a while you're going to have you know, a hurricane or something like that, and then you're going to really need the fund balance. For debt service, there is no real target except to stay above water. So part of our property taxes go to INS, which is the interest and savings fund, interest and sinking fund, INS, and we get that in property taxes to pay for the debt. And so since we get that, and as long as we don't borrow more than that, we're going to be fine. So there's no real limit to it. Jim, do you have anything to add on that?
Well, we keep a little bit of a fund balance for cash flow purposes because most of our money comes in January and February, and we've got 2 big payments in August and then in February. So that's why I have a fund balance just to tide us over the payments.
One of the other things I remember talking about at last year's budget vote was the importance of maintaining flexibility for a future bond and not restricting. It's a mechanism that I think reduces our ability to tax or something like that. Is that still something that we are preserving? Because you know, I think everybody agrees that the district is going to need a bond.
Yeah. So Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, or add to this. But there's a couple things. One, you want to hold your debt down so that you will have the ability to borrow with low interest in the case where we get a bond. The other thing is you want to keep your AAA rating or AA plus. During the COVID years and the ESSER years, students got weights from the district. Most of it was passed through from the state. For example, if you're an EB student, if you're an at-risk student, if you're an EcoDis student, if you're a SPED student, there's money, a weight, an allocation from the state attached to the student. And then that got passed through. What the district did is hold harmless the weights or kept them stable. So even if you lost special ed students, you got the same amount of allocation. The school got the same amount of allocation. That was good for some schools and bad for others. Because if you gain special ed students, well, SPED is the one category that was different, but EB students, for example, if you gain them, whatever you had as an allocation the year before, that maintained. And several other things that we can talk about on how money was allocated. So we are using a methodology that the state uses and most districts use, except for the salary, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We take the enrollment, we take the ADA, and then the base resource allocation, and then it equals what we're going to give you, plus the weights. But now we're giving the weights as defined by the state and as the actual students who are there. So if the state gives a weight to EB, that same weight goes to this student, but only the students who are actually in your school. And so there's a change there for some schools. And then finally, we will pay for the teachers But because we have a pay-for-performance model, we have to estimate what that's going to be. And then we will true up. And let me show you exactly how we do that. By the way, I said this earlier, I just want everybody to be clear. One of the reasons why the budgets will change is because we are increasing salaries. And so I'll just say right off the bat, even if I got the same money, school, even if I got the same amount of money budget as last year, it feels like it's less money. It is for other things because the salary is increased. So, and we want the salaries to increase, but it's got to be paid for. And so your salary line item now is increased. And so that gives you less money, gives you the same amount of money total, but it gives you less money for other things. So, go ahead.
I'm just trying to make sure I understand that discrepancy. So just theoretically, so we can conceive it, that discrepancy, then the principal handles how to make their budget work, but like what kinds of things are we talking about? So if we know like a principal pays teachers, but when you say the money's gonna same amount of pot, we have to pay the teachers more, like what are the other things or what's on the table? Or does that look totally different for each school?
So there's all kinds of, just name a few of the things that are in a school's budget. A lot of schools have different programming, or they pay for after-school tutoring, a program that they want, or they buy a special curriculum for an intervention. We pay for the curriculum that one of three, if they choose that, but there's all kinds of minor things. Or they pay for more equipment, or more laptops for teachers, and they pay for positions. So we fund the number of positions, teacher positions, that, let's say a school had 43 last year, we're doing 43. If they want, they could decrease the number of positions. And then they wouldn't have to cut so much in other areas. So there are some schools with more office managers than the typical school. There's some teachers with a testing coordinator, whereas many do not. There's some schools with librarians, whereas many do not, and so forth and so on. So there's the schools have budget authority when they're an EAS school.
And we say the school, we're meaning the principal. So that's the part of the budget that the principal manages how he wants to distribute or do his programming.
That's right.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, so, and just to remind you, the whole district is moving to this pay, and we've done the evaluations this year, pay for performance evaluations this year, so the first time people will be paid for that evaluation starts in August. And it looks like this. And the reason why there's an increase, think about our target distribution for teacher pay for performance. 40% of the teachers by distribution will be proficient 1, 12% will be proficient 2, 8% will be exemplary 1. That's 60% of the evaluated teachers in the EAS schools will be making 80,000 proficient 1, 12% will be proficient 2. So if you're brand new, 8% will be $80,000 because you don't have an evaluation. You make 70 or 74. For the NES schools, it'll be either 83 or 89. So 60% of the NES teachers will be making more than 83 or 89,000. So that's a huge increase, and that's why that's the average salary for teachers. And it's way up from 22-23 school year. And that's a good thing for our teachers. That comes at a cost for the entire district. We're not able to do as many things as we want to do because we are putting the money in the classroom and into the people who are most directly responsible for the education of kids, which is the way it should be in our profession. So on the NES campus budget, just the line here is that they don't actually have a lot of autonomy over their budgets. We staff them, we tell them how many APs they get to have, how many principal, teacher apprentices, et cetera. The one thing to note, though, the academic need for special focus schools and schools that are NES, there's a $500 per pupil that we're starting to put into the weights. So this is the same methodology, except you see the weights there. Future 2, just want to spend a minute on that because it's a little bit different. It isn't, Future 2 schools are NES schools, but they're organized different. They're in the afternoon especially. They have more experiences and field trips and things like that. And so for this first year, this pilot year with 9 schools, we're estimating an increase per school of about $500,000, and that's why you see the $4.5 million, and that was in the budget assumptions and methodologies report. So they also don't have a real autonomous budget. We provide their budget for them. So let's talk about EAS schools, because this is where they do have control over their budget. So just like the state, we have a base allocation times projected enrollment times ADA. That's the basic funding formula. Plus the weights. So we have special populations times the weight, and then we add that. And then we add the money for the salaries and benefits. So let me take you through an example. Here's a school with 470 students projected, and we have to do a projection, and then I know there's always some anxiety because principals will ask, well, what if I come in higher than my projection? It's like, yes, we will true up. In December, in November, we true up, meaning if you got more kids, you get more money. If you got fewer kids, you get less money. So this is an example, plus the weights. So you see some of the weights there, special education, or some of the categories, gifted and talented, CTE, refugee, homeless. There's 25 different categories that the state has. Some are very unique. Anyways, those are the counts. So in this example, that money goes to the kids, who are the number of kids are in each of those categories, and that totals $374,000 in this example. So we take this 638 plus this 374, and then we add the salaries. Now, I don't want to get into too much detail, but let me just tell you, we took the number of teachers from last year. Now, that may be too high or maybe too low, but it's probably too high. So we didn't feel like changing it. We just took what they had last year and said, okay, you have 21 teachers last year. We're going to pay for 21 teachers this year. Now, if you need more teachers, that'll be handled in the enrollment and the other monies that you get. So 21 teachers, and we have a target distribution for that. And we pay for the target distribution, which is the whole district is placed on a target distribution. So a school with 21 teachers, 35% of them will be proficient 1. The reason why that's not 40 is because we assume some decrease or people leaving the district. Not a lot, but some. So instead of 8, they have 7. But it won't matter because we give them that amount, and then in October, or September, when we find out your actual staff and their actual evaluations, we will pay for that. But we have to start somewhere, and this is where we start. Because if it's an average school, it's going to be reflective of the target distribution. But if I'm a school and I chase after exemplary teachers and proficient 2 teachers, good for me, because the district will pay for that come September when we do the true-up on salaries. So we don't want teachers, we don't want principals chasing but progressing 1 and progressing 2 teachers just to save money. That wouldn't make any sense.
That was a little confusing to me. So teachers are encouraged to get the best teachers they can get.
That's right.
Don't worry about what the cost is.
That's right, because we will pay the cost of the...
You'll pay the difference.
The difference.
Based on, okay, thank you.
Yeah, so in the end of the day, we are paying. Here's the other side of that coin. I don't know if I said this, but if you get a whole bunch of progressing 1 and progressing 2, we're going to pay for the salaries. You might have to pay us back something. You follow? Yeah, so the point is, we pay for the evaluations and the salaries. We got to start somewhere. We're going to give you this to start, 1.7 in this example. We got to start somewhere, but in the end, whatever they actually have, we're paying for that.
Can I have, what about when you hire someone from out of the district? How does that principal make that fit in this model?
Yeah, so the determination of people outside the district is by rule, so the principals don't have any choice on that. If you are less than 3 years experience and you come from outside the district, you'll be at progressing 1. If you're 3 or more years, you're progressing 2. So until you get evaluated, because if you don't have an evaluation, we are loath to give you $80,000 to start.
Is there a master teacher designation or something, like if you get a veteran coming in, or do they have to come in and then wait to be evaluated to kind of jump into the...
They have to be evaluated for one, the first year they're either going to make $70,000 or $74,000.
Thank you.
And just to make a point of what you just said, because it's a very nuanced question, what this will likely do, we probably will not get master's teachers with 20 years. They're not going to come to the district. At the same time, we're going to probably hold on to our master teachers. In fact, already we see that. We see that our most effective teachers are staying at higher numbers. Last year, the exemplary teachers, 90-some% returned. Proficient 2 teachers, 88% returned, somewhere around there. So we know that now when they're getting paid like this, just like in Dallas, their exemplary teachers are, I think they have 99% return. I mean, people do retire or get promoted to some other thing, but almost all their exemplary teachers return, and same with their proficient 2 teachers. It'll be the same way here.
It's technically possible for a teacher to new teacher go from progressing to exemplary or to a higher level in 1 year if they perform at that level. Is that correct?
No. They have to, they can only advance 1 year at a time. And I think the very first year, someone over here correct me if I'm wrong, the very first year, like you're progressing 2, I think you can move to proficient 2, but I'm not sure. Yes, you can.
Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, you can start as a new teacher, 74,000 or at 70,000, and the following year be at 80,000. Well, for 1 year you'll be at 70,000. The following year you could be at 80,000. But back to the school budgets.
It's on school budgets.
Yeah, so I just wanted to point out this ceiling and floor example. So what this means is this. I have a budget from last year, let's say it's $5 million. And then because of our new methodology, I'm at $4.5 million. We're not going to let you lose 500,000. We're going to let you lose only 1% of the difference. So 1% of 500,000 of your budget, I mean, of 5 million is $50,000. You see what I mean? So in this case here, this is a school that is supposed to get $2,798,042 plus 92, which is $2,969,000 is what they're going to get because we gave them $79,000. They would have lost $110,000, but because of the because of the floor, the 1%, they're only losing $30,000. See that? Yes, Angela.
My first one is on allocations. So so they have different designations for SPED or for different designations. So does one child accumulate all the things that they are, like how does
Yes.
the double dip or what is
It
that?
can
part?
be. If you are an EB student who's also EcoDis, you could get the money for both.
Okay,
And
got it.
same with SPED.
Okay. And then a
But
couple,
it's not a full 1 point. It's smaller points, and those are all described by the state.
and then one other, when you were talking about Future 2 and the 500,000, the difference, is that a difference this year to get started, or is that a difference in budget to run that school that runs?
Yeah, great question. And the answer is it's to get started. However, we are going to be looking for, during the course of this year, the reason why we're only starting with 9 schools is how we get that number down. If we get that number down to around 250 to 300,000, it'll be very similar to the DIAD program and travel combined. So that's what we're looking for. But right now, it's a start. We think there's going to be some equipment costs. We think there's some things we're going to learn, some efficiencies. A lot of that's going to be in field trips. If we have to cut back the number of field trips, we will, but right now we're planning for field trips every 3 weeks. So the transportation cost is huge on that, so that's where that money comes in. But we're going to learn this year and see how we can cut that back. And then this is the other end of this is a different school, 881. These are the weights. So again, we take base times enrollment times ADA. That gives you an amount there. And then we add weights.
Back to your weights, that explains where there is a possibility of a student getting 2 or 3 categories of
That's
weights,
right.
right? So that adds up more than just total students, which I saw earlier.
That's right.
So that adds up to maybe
That's
three
why you
times,
see-
2.5 times the number of students in the school because of the possibility of
That's
getting
right.
2 or 3 weights to that single student.
Right. So weights, then we add the salary. Same thing, in this case, there were 43 teachers. We use the target distribution. We give them an amount. If in the end of the day they have more proficient and exemplary teachers, higher amount needed, we make the difference. If they have a lot more progressing 1, progressing 2 teachers, then they pay us back some. And in this case, the school last year was making $5,454,000. Based on the allocation this year, they were making quite a bit more, $5,672,000 plus 51. So we took 51,000 away from them, so they're only 4% over last year's amount. So they're capped at a 4% increase. So in this case, they lost $51,000. They're still over by 4%. So yes, we capped it that way. And the reason why is that when you're using a new methodology, we really should stick to the new methodology, but because people have gotten used to the money that they had, we try to keep it within a range. We can't always do that. At some point, you have to go to the methodology that makes sense and the methodology that almost everybody else uses.
So I understand how we want to help if they're losing money, but if the allocation says they deserve more money because of all these things, how do we explain how do those things not shore up to the actual kids and the things? So about the ones where they get more money, can you explain how we handle that?
Yeah, because we are actually giving them the money for the kids. The difference is not there. The difference is in the salaries or the number of teachers they have and things like that. And so they are getting what they deserve,
Okay.
Which is the allocation times the weights times ADA, et cetera.
So no students are losing anything in this. We're talking
No,
about
that's
those
right. If
other
you are-
aspects of the budget that are under discretion.
That's
they're
right.
not- Okay, thank you.
That's right. And that is mostly in salaries and the number of teachers and the types of teachers you have. All right, and so I'm sorry that took a little longer than I expected. Real quick, level 5. What you need to know here is we use the state formula. By contract, we give them the amount of money that's deserved through contract. In our case, one-time only offer, we're also giving them the magnet subsidy. So every other 1882 has to fend for themselves depending on their programming, but in this case, we're providing magnet subsidies to these 4 schools. That's it for the school's budget. Quickly on the office budgets, just want you to know our central office has really been carrying the weight of a lot of the right sizing of the district. That's another way of saying we've given them a lot more work to do with fewer people because we had to cut staff. We didn't want to cut as much in the schools, so we have been cutting central office. And we've been doing that for 3 years. Now, the first year was a lot more than now, and last year I think was about 750. And this year we're going to, when the dust settles, it'll probably be somewhere between 300 and 350 employees. Now, it's not just employees, it's also purchase services. So you can see here, we're continuing those cuts from $619 to $604 million. So you can see by department where the cuts are. And then keep in mind that we do have an action plan and we fund those first. If you remember the assumptions and methodologies chart, what we say in the key actions are up in the top right-hand corner. Those are expenditures. That's how we prioritize. So that's where you see the key actions column is. And that's only the central office key actions because there's schools key actions, things that happen in the schools.
Can you
Go back.
Mm-hmm. Can you just define organizational effectiveness, like who that is?
Yeah, that's a position that Kari Feinberg holds, and she does a number of things related to organizational effectiveness. Transportation is probably the biggest thing under that, but also FACE, the public affairs office is under organizational effectiveness.
So, Mike, to be clear, you're basically doing a zero-based budgeting from the bottom up. This is something we need to understand because most governments do incremental budgeting based on what they spend today and then what they're going to spend next year, and it's always going to be more, right? But what you're saying is that you're going 270 schools or whatever schools up to get to those numbers that we saw on that single sheet. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I call it modified zero-based budgeting. But the biggest point in zero-based budgeting is that you fund the things that you have to do first. New initiatives, innovation, research and development, whatever it is. And so if you notice our process, we start with the action plan, and then we put that money right here, and we say that's an expenditure. That cuts the budget already by this much, and then we look at each department to see what needs to be impacted because of budget. So for example, transportation was not cut, like to the same extent the other departments were cut. Why? Because we're doing the new student badging, because we have a new tracking system for our budget, for our buses, because we're adding Future 2 and special education hubs. And so we think there's going to be more money, at least at first, because we're adding routes, more field trips for kids. So if we were to say everybody gets cut 3%, that's not zero-based budgeting, but that's how a lot of districts do it. So thanks for pointing that out. I really appreciate you noticing that.
All right, Sue. So I'm looking now at the campus allocations we were provided, and so we've got the final allocation from 25-26, the preliminary allocation changes, and obviously those changes have now been shrunk down because there are some pretty big ones. I'm looking at minus 16, minus 19%, plus 26%, and we've tightened that up to a -1 to a +4 band. But then you go on to the NES, and you have some similar swings. And bigger. I mean, there's one on here that's like a -32%. But I see that and I say, as a principal, how do you manage that? But the answer is the principal is not managing that. Is that right? Because it's NES and that's being handled by your team?
Yes, and there are certain schools that we subsidize because of particular reasons. One is small schools. So if we chose to keep a small school open, and we do, and let's say you're at 250 kids, sometimes it's really hard to meet budget. No matter how frugal you are, you still have to have X amount of teachers. And if you have a special needs section in your school, then you have to have X amount of teachers, even if you only have 4 kids. SPED. So we will subsidize those programs. So in those cases where you see a huge swing like that, it means the district is probably paying for that. There are also some high schools where even though they're at 4%, we are subsidizing a couple of career tech ed teachers because of the same concept. If we're not going to sunset a CTE program that's still being attended by kids, and we want to keep a number of programs there until the Southside Launchpad is built or until Barbara Jordan, then we're going to have smaller class sizes at some of these high schools, and we're going to have to subsidize that. So most schools are going to fall under this, but there are outliers that we work on one-on-one.
Thank you. I have a question about Chromebooks. You mentioned Chromebooks for teachers. How are campuses going to process the expiration of warranties or coverage on Chromebooks that were purchased during the pandemic? And is that different between the EAS and the NES campuses?
Huge sore spot.
Sorry.
No, it's the right question though. The answer is this. The first thing we've had to do, and we've done a lot of that, but we're not done, and that is tag all the Chromebooks, all the items, with the barcode. Now, most of them have been barcoded, but not all of them. And there hasn't been a good inventory system. Jim Terry has been, asking for one for 2 years. And so we are putting into place an inventory system, and we have taken some of the autonomy away to repair and maintain those. We're going to do some centralization so that schools get, because what happens is you have kids coming and going. If you don't have office manager or assistant principal watching closely those Chromebooks and other things that can walk, at the end of the year, there's several that are lost. Or if they're not replaced, if they're broken, you don't put in a work order to try to get them replaced, or you're not keeping track of the warranty. That's all supposed to be at the school level. But in my experience, and it's not just here, it's really hard to do that at the school level, especially if you don't have a process to do a district-wide inventory on a regular basis. So we're working on that. Fortunately or unfortunately, we have lost enrollment, and so we have enough Chromebooks still. What we're going through right now is a process to check the warranty. And then replace those Chromebooks that we can, and keep the other ones working if they're still working. So it's a great question, but it's going to take a lot more effort before we get it right.
We had an internal audit report on that, if you recall, that we presented to the board, and they have definitely improved the tagging. My devices got tagged, everybody's here got tagged because they weren't tagged before. And so it is an ongoing thing that we need to be vigilant on, but it is really hard given the numbers and how small they are and stuff. Anybody else? Marty?
I just want to make a comment. I was watching national news today, and there've been a lot of commentary on the New York City school budget, which is $44 billion. And they are spending $42,000 to $44,000 per student. They should send all their kids to St. John's because that's about the same price. And they mentioned on the national news that Chicago and Los Angeles were about half of that, or maybe a little more than half, and we're exactly a quarter of that on a per student basis. We know that the student outcomes in New York are substantially lower than ours and going down. So the outcomes of spending $44,000 a student don't prove that it actually provides a better educational outcome, but it certainly does bloat a city's budget, and as you know, obviously the inference for New York City's citizens is higher taxes. We just don't, and it seems for some reason they're somehow disconnected from the tax system, and that they can just raise their budget at will, and somehow that state or somebody funds them. I don't know how that actually works. But all I can say is that, I'm sure it doesn't work, I understand that. I just want to say, you know, and we're not unique in this at Houston, but among the large city school districts in the United States, we were singled out in that report as being about a quarter of what New York City spends on a per student basis.
Yeah, and you know, look, I always say this, resources do matter, and I wish I had more, right, for the district. But at the same time, you always have enough money when you're a big district to do what you prioritize. And the question is, what is the priority? And there are people that want us to be all things, all people, and spend money on everything. That's what New York does, right? I mean, they're not getting outcomes. So just throwing money and people at a problem usually doesn't solve your problem. Making a system that's effective usually does. And so, yeah, I think you should be proud of this team and the district as a whole for being frugal. It's painful. You know, you cut one person in a team, that's painful to that team. You know, and you put more money in teachers and you don't raise the salaries over here as much, then, you know, people get angry about that. But in the end of the day, as a district, we've been using the money well, prioritizing, and getting the job done.
Just one last comment, since this will be the last question, and we'll go into executive session. This is not a question, this is just I want to thank the team for answering questions. I want to thank the team for putting all this detail together. It really is important. I know it's hard, and especially when you have to cut the budget and you have to have to lose staff that are really working hard. We really appreciate everything that you do, so thank you very much for that. And I know we have another month before of questions that will be coming. I know we're going to also put out the information that we all got to the public, which is a list of schools and comparisons of last year and this year and the weightings and all that. And then also some of the other data that we talked about, which is PUA per student dollars versus NES, and some detail around that like we did last year too. So that will be coming out for folks. I know they want that. But I just want to thank the staff and the team. Great job in a tough environment, but we are moving the needle on student achievement with prioritizing where the dollars go, and I think that's really great. So thanks. And we'll now,
Mr. President,
yes.
If you don't mind, can we spend just a minute on health insurance?
Sure.
And the reason why is health insurance has not come up. It's usually a part of every big budget, and you may have missed in the method. You didn't miss, but some people may have missed in methodologies report that $4 million increase in healthcare. So I just want to say just a word about it, and I want to ask Chief of Staff to do that, Monica Drajewski.
Good evening, board members. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share some information about health insurance with you all. I'd like to spend a few minutes discussing one of the significant financial pressures within our fiscal year 27 budget, and that's employee health insurance. And so we want to provide some transparency into the current state of the district's health insurance costs and outline the financial challenges we are experiencing here. We are in the process of planning to ensure health insurance costs become sustainable for the district over the long term. So I want to start by putting HISD's healthcare contributions into context by comparing our plan costs to other large urban and surrounding districts. And so one of the most important takeaways from this slide is that HISD currently contributes significantly more toward employee health care premiums than many comparable and surrounding districts. And so our HISD contribution is there in the orange column. And so you see that we contribute on average approximately $671 per employee per month, which is substantially higher than our peer districts represented here. And at the same time, our employee-only contributions, indicated in the blue columns, remain among the lowest in our comparison group. And for our family coverage, represented in the green, HISD employees also pay significantly less than employees in surrounding and comparative districts. And so we have historically prioritized lower employee contributions and more expansive plan offerings, but rising claims and costs make that model increasingly difficult to sustain without making adjustments. And so as employee rates have not kept up with the increasing costs in the healthcare space, these contribution levels have created increasing financial pressure on our health insurance plan, particularly as medical and pharmacy costs continue to rise nationally. And so our goal is to preserve quality coverage while ensuring that the plan remains financially sustainable for both employees and the district. And so I wanted to quickly highlight what some of the largest drivers are that are contributing to the financial challenges within the health insurance fund. And so first, we continue to experience a small number of very high-cost medical claims that account for a disproportionate share of total expenditures. The trend is not unique to HISD. It is occurring nationally across employer-sponsored health plans. Second, pharmacy costs continue to rise rapidly. Pharmacy expenses are currently trending approximately 13% above where expected. Specialty medications in particular continue to be one of the fastest growing cost drivers in healthcare. And we're also seeing lower than anticipated rebate performance from our pharmacy benefit arrangements. Third, our utilization patterns within the Nexus plan have shifted, so employees using these providers is at a higher rate than we had originally projected, which increases our overall claims costs. And then finally, federal implementation of the No Surprises Act has significantly increased out-of-network reimbursement costs, particularly for Texas employers operating self-funded plans, which is us, HISD. So collectively, these factors are creating structural pressure on our health insurance fund that must be addressed proactively. And again, I do want to emphasize the fact that these are systemic healthcare market pressures that employers are experiencing nationally. It's not isolated to HISD. And so this particular slide shows the financial trajectory of our health insurance fund over the past several years. And so as you can see, operating expenses have consistently exceeded our operating revenues. In fiscal year 23, the plan experienced a negative change in position of approximately $6.8 million there in that row that's highlighted. That deficit increased to nearly $20 million in fiscal year 24. In fiscal year 25, despite corrective actions and supplemental funding strategies, the plan still experienced an estimated loss exceeding $10 million. In fiscal year 26, the current forecast projects an approximately $25 million deficit. And so it's important to note that the health fund balance has, as a result, steadily declined. And so those are the two rows right below the highlighted row. So the projected ending balance for fiscal year 26 is currently forecasted to become negative because it's been in decline year over year. So to stabilize this fund in prior years, the district reallocated resources from other areas, as you see indicated, and while those reallocations help temporarily stabilize the plan, they're not sustainable long-term. And so this is why we're in the process of planning for cost containment strategies and design changes as part of the fiscal year 27 discussion. And so one of the things I do want to note is that employee contributions are likely to go up. This is why the administration is simultaneously proposing compensation investments, including a 4% general pay increase for eligible employees and an increase in the minimum hourly wage to $17 per hour to help offset the anticipated increases in the employee health care costs. Any plan changes will be communicated to our employees during the open enrollment period, which takes place in the fall in October to November, and no changes would go into effect until January of 2027. And so to conclude, I want to reiterate that our proposed budget is centered on investing in our students, supporting our teachers and principals, and maintaining the district's long-term financial sustainability. So I want to thank you all for your time and happy to take any questions on the healthcare portion.
So, you know, you showed originally what this district has been paying as compared to individuals and families. Do you all have a sense now of where the lines will be drawn? I just did kind of a rough back of the envelope, 2,000 hours, an extra $2 an hour is $4,000 a year. Are you looking for something that's almost equal to that? You know, that's $333 a month?
So I can't, I mean, if I gave you a number right now, I'd be speculating. We have an open enrollment process all the time. In the fall, we're going to have an open enrollment process again. The insurance companies have something to say about that because they're the ones who will peg the different rates. And so we'll wait and look to see what happens. Here's what I think is going to happen, and here's what we'll probably control to a certain extent. We want to make sure that our fund balance for healthcare is sustainable over the long haul. In other words, we can't just keep going into debt. And we don't want our employees to go from where they are today to where Dallas is or where any other district is. But over many years, that's probably what has to happen in order for us to maintain it. So we'll look at what the rates are in the fall. And the only reason for telling you this now, it's not the general fund, it's a different fund. But the reason for telling you this now is that we are raising salaries. That part of the rationale is to ensure that with the raises, it will minimize the impact of any healthcare increase. Employees expect, or in most places expect healthcare costs to go up. We will continue to eat our share of it, meaning the district, but we can't eat all of it. And that's the message we're sending.
And I'm sorry, is that a message that has been sent to the staff?
We had an email go out today. I'm sure it'll be covered here, and we have another email coming out talking about this presentation. But we're given notice way ahead of time that there is an open enrollment period. People expect that in the fall. It'll be in conjunction with that, just like always. And nothing changes until January 2027. So it'll depend on what you choose as an employee. Maybe you don't do the employee and spouse, or just do an employee. I mean, people will make their choices like they have always made their choices based on their own financial situation.
To clarify that there is also plan changes, like available plans that will be changing as well, right, to that point?
Yes, except the same footnote. That depends on the open enrollment and what the insurance company comes back with. And so we'll have to wait and see. I don't want people to panic or anything. Just know that most of the increase, if there is an increase in healthcare, this 4% increase, the teacher salary increase, the minimum wage increase is going to really help families offset that cost.
And one thing I would just add as far as the plan selection, the team is analyzing which of the plans are the most popular or have the highest number of employees using it, and so that is part of the analysis of any changes to plans or plan offerings.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
Superintendent, you ready to go to closed session now? Okay. Great. At this time, the board will recess to its closed session under Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code, Open Meetings Act, Section 551.004 through 551.089. Should board final action, vote, or decision on any matter considered in the closed session be required, such final action, vote, or decision shall be taken at an open meeting convened by this notice upon the reconvening of this public meeting or at a subsequent public meeting of the board upon notice thereof. The board has recessed into closed session at 6:40 p.m. on May 20th, 2026.